Today we're at the 51st annual meeting of the Health Physics Society. It's Monday, June 26th, 2006. And we are happy to be able to interview Dr. William Bryant. Everybody knows him as Bill Bryant.
No, it's not Dr. either.
Do you want to read it?
No, it's
And he's had extensive experience in health physics, and his original work was, he was a charter member of the Health Physics Society. And today he's going to talk a little bit about his career in health physics and the contributions that he's made and his friends have made in health physics throughout the years. Bill, tell us a little bit about how you got started in health physics.
Well, I was stationed at Carswell Air Force Base and was discharged from the Air Force, and just went across the runway to start working at Convair. And they had a project at that time to decontaminate some aircraft that had been involved in the specific bomb tests. And so I started out by taking smears on big airplanes. And I didn't, when I got the job, I went back home and told my wife, well, I'm going to start to work at Convair. She said, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'm working in health physics. And she said, what's health physics? I said, I have no idea. I don't know anything about it. But then I started working there, and I started liking the work, and so that just led to other projects, other things.
It's very interesting. Well, what initially brought you into physics and the idea of going into health physics?
Well, my background in the Air Force was electronics, and I had every intention of becoming an electrical engineer. And but when I started working in health physics, I started liking the work so well that I said, well, I'll try this out for a little while. And then I start the school in the evening, and and get that degree, work and get the degree. And so about that time, in this time period, they started talking about a aircraft nuclear propulsion program, and of course that created an interest. And they transferred me into that particular area. So that's when I started working in that area out of the decontamination process.
Now, you said that your career has roughly been divided into three portions:
Right.
Industrial, academic, and consultation.
Yeah, right.
Could you tell us a little bit about the first one, the industrial?
Yeah, we had a program General Dynamics now it's called, well, I guess it's now Lockheed, but anyway, we had a program of testing an airplane to see about radiation effects and also crew shielding with atomic power. And we flew an airplane out of Carswell with a reactor in the bomb bay, and we found out immediately that we had to have two types of shielding. We had to have a shadow shield and a crew shield. If we had just a crew shield, the plane would fly about like this. Because we had to have a center of gravity. So we put a shadow shield in front of the reactor, and then we had the crew shielded in a capsule like up front. And so, and also for studies made on radiation effects of parts, and so this plane flew 47 missions out of Fort Worth on a regular flight pattern out to West Texas and eastern New Mexico, and then they operated the reactor out in that test area. The reactor was only a passenger. It didn't furnish any power or anything for anything except just for those specific tests.
Very interesting. How did you get into the academic portion?
Well, in 1972, the Air Force decided to close that facility at Fort Worth. So I started looking for other employment, and ended up at the University of Texas as the radiation safety officer, which is quite different to the industry. And so I've spent 19 years there as the radiation safety officer, and retired from that position as Director of Environmental Health and Safety in 1992.
And then you moved on to your consultation.
Right. the last year or two that I was at the university, I was doing some consulting work. And then when I moved from there, I went to work as a consultant to the Texas Low-Level Radioactive Waste Disposal Authority and worked with them for several years. And we went through the process of application for a license, the hearing and all this, and then at the very end they said, no, we're not going to approve that license. So they closed that facility and also closed out that agency. And so then I moved over to do some work for another company in Care of Texas. And we were trying to get a facility out in West Texas. And so we worked on that for 3 or 4 years, license applications and doing all the things, environmental sampling. And then the company got involved in a lawsuit, which I had nothing to do with. And the settlement was for the Care of Texas to move out of Texas and go on somewhere else. And so that stopped that program. And then the most recent one is I've been doing some work with a company that's trying to reopen a uranium in situ mining facility down in South Texas. The facility had been closed in 1989, 1990, been inoperable all this time. And they wanted to know, do a radiological evaluation and how much it would cost to restore, how long it would take them to get a license, and how much it would cost to get a license to operate. And so the reason being, I guess, the price of uranium has gone up enough until they can afford to mine it now. And they told me the reason they closed it was they were getting $8 for uranium. It was costing $12. So you don't stay in business very long in that situation.
Well, you joined the HPS in what year?
1956.
1956. And now where do you live?
I live in Austin, still live in Austin.
Still live in Austin.
Yeah, by the way, the annual fee in 1956 was $2.
That's when you joined?
Oh, that's when I joined, yeah.
Well, I'd like to ask you one question of what do you think is your most valuable contribution to health physics? Since you have 3 separate different areas.
Well, yes, there was some contribution in it, obviously in all 3 areas. One of the things that when I was working at General Dynamics, we were involved in the Rover project, which is a nuclear powered missile, so we was involved in that. And during this time, NASA was getting involved in the space work, and our engineering department designed some portable survey instruments that went with the astronauts. And one of my jobs was to calibrate those instruments before we sent them down to NASA, and that was very interesting work. And then, of course, at the university, there's so many things there that go on in an academic situation. I think the biggest contribution I made there was to help the professors to conduct their experiments in a safe manner. And sometimes that's difficult.
That can be challenging.
It can be challenging, yes. And then, of course, consulting, you just do whatever they ask you to do, in license application, in environmental monitoring, evaluation, and things like that.
Well, what are your plans for the future now?
Golf. I'm not soliciting any work right now. When people call, I do get calls. I go and help. I had an experience of working at 3 different universities and closing down facilities for them. Tennessee Tech, SMU, and Mississippi State. So I've worked at those places, and it's always a challenge. And I guess the thing now is that when I go out to do a job, I have to re-educate myself because the rules and regulations change so frequently that if you don't keep up to date, then you're lost.
Have you been involved in any of this terrorism?
No, I have not.
Stuff?
I'm on the list to be called for emergency monitoring, but I haven't been involved in anything.
Well, you have some materials here. Could you tell us a little bit about them?
Yes, this is a picture of the airplane that carried the reactor, and it always had a chase plane, and the chase plane had 10 people, men, that were ready to parachute in case we had to eject the reactor or if the plane went down for some reason. And it was their job to secure the area while waiting for help. And so these guys were trained. They went out to Biggs Air Force Base in El Paso and took jump lessons. And they had quite a few wild stories about that. But they were engineer type people. And so they were taught how to parachute, and they did it. And then one of the other projects that we worked on is when we were working in this area, the Air Force decided we needed to have some sort of a guide for a proposed nuclear air base. So we put this together, and this is one of the major problems is when a plane with a reactor is up in the air for long periods of time, then obviously they have to come back, they have to land somewhere, and there was a significant radiation problem with that. Dismantling, getting crews out and what have you. So this little pamphlet here describes on how this was proposed. Obviously we never did it because the airplane never did go nuclear. And then one of the other things that went along with that particular program was an extensive environmental monitoring program going out to West Texas and eastern New Mexico. And we took air, water, soil, vegetation in this large area, several square miles, and we did this for about 2 or 3 years. And then when the program stopped, of course, we stopped our environmental monitoring program out there.
Do you have anything that you'd like to add to the interview?
No, I just think that someone going into the profession, they can make a significant contribution to our country and our world. We all know that the process for educating the public is a very unique and a responsible position for the health physicist. And I think maybe that's where we failed early on in our program, was lack of communication with the public.
Well, thank you very much, Bill Bryant. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.